Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for entering the Shangri-La Ballroom so promptly. I would invite you as quickly as possible to identify your seat and then to take it so that we can begin this first plenary of the 14th IISS Shangri-La Dialogue. Perhaps I might begin by thanking again His Excellency the Prime Minister of Singapore for the masterful strategic survey that he provided last night in delivering the opening keynote address to this Shangri-La Dialogue, an important feature of these 50th anniversary celebrations of Singapore independence. We heard an exhilarating analysis of the strategic landscape in the Asia-Pacific and also aspirations for how regional prosperity and security could be secured by the type of regional cooperation that this Shangri-La Dialogue seeks to encourage. Could I remind you all that the plenary sessions at the IISS Shangri-La Dialogue are on the record. That applies both, of course, to the speakers addressing the delegates from this stage, but equally to those making comments and questions from the floor. We want to invite, during the dialogue, short questions and comments to the speaker or speakers, and I'd like to remind everybody of the system we have for that, which is that any delegate who wishes to ask a question should insert their chip card in the right-hand side of the microphone. That is their delegate card with the chip facing in the right way, and press the button. And your microphone will turn green, but the fact that your microphone turns green does not mean that your microphone is on. It means that you are in my list of people seeking the floor, and when I select you to speak and name, your microphone will turn red, then it will be on. You can ask your question crisply or make your comment briefly, and then I will be able to turn your microphone off. So if one looks around the room and sees 12 green lights on, that doesn't mean any of those microphones are live. It only means that those people have sought the floor and I'm able properly to recognize you from here. The first opening plenary at this Shangri-La Dialogue is on the theme, the United States and Challenges to Asia-Pacific Security, and we're delighted to have with us the 25th U.S. Secretary of Defense, Dr. Ash Carter. Many of you know of his extraordinary accomplishments in public service. Some of you might not know that when he was an undergraduate at Yale University, he had a double major in medieval history and physics. And it occurred to me that medieval history and physics is probably the perfect intellectual combination of skills for a Secretary of Defense now facing the security challenges of the second decade of the 21st century. Ash Carter has been a longtime friend and member of the IISS, a special fixture in the world of strategic studies, has combined his deep knowledge of science and technology with his equally nuanced appreciation of international affairs and strategic relationships to advise some 11 Secretaries of Defense indirectly or directly. He's been a long-time expert on the Asia-Pacific region, and in fact came to the IISS Shangri-La Dialogue in 2002, the very first year of the Shangri-La Dialogue, as a renowned academic specialist, and it's a delight now in 2015 to receive him at the 14th Shangri-La Dialogue as the U.S. Secretary of Defense. Dr. Ash Carter, the podium is yours. Thank you very much for coming to us this year.
Well, thank you, John. Thanks for that kind introduction. Thank you for sponsoring this remarkable forum. Over its history, IISS has hosted invaluable conversations like Shangri-La Dialogue and produced important scholarship, and through all of that, you've made our world more secure. On behalf of the United States, thank you. One reason I've enjoyed coming to this dialogue since attending it for the first time, as John noted, in 2002, is the opportunity to visit with so many good friends the United States has in this region. On my way to Southeast Asia, I attended a change of command ceremony, the U.S. Pacific Command in Hawaii. And there I met with Philippines National Defense Secretary Gazmin. And when I arrived in Singapore, I had the opportunity to visit with Prime Minister Lee, who gave a characteristically wise and incisive keynote last night, and with Minister Ng to talk about regional challenges and a deepening defense relationship. Of course, I see so many friends and partners here today, and I'll meet with many of you after these sessions. From Singapore, I'll travel to Vietnam with visits in Haiphong and then Hanoi, where Vietnamese Defense Minister General Tan and I will sign a joint vision statement for greater operational cooperation, the first time that the United States and Vietnam commit to do so. And then I'll fly on to India to tour the Eastern Naval Command at Vizag and meet with my counterpart in New Delhi to sign the new U.S.-India defense framework that will guide military cooperation between us for the next decade. Each of these stops, just like my visits to Japan and the Republic of Korea last month, is a reminder of the regional demand for persistent American engagement and the importance of the regional security architecture that has helped so many Asia-Pacific nations to rise and prosper. And that's the theme of my remarks today. The United States wants a shared regional architecture that is strong enough, capable enough, and connected enough to ensure that all Asia-Pacific peoples and nations have the opportunity to rise and continue to rise in the future. The United States wants a future in which an Indonesian fisherman, an energy executive from Malaysia, an entrepreneur from Singapore, a small business owner from California, and a Chinese businesswoman, just to name a few, have the security and opportunity to rise and prosper. And the United States wants to protect the rights of all countries, whether large or small, to win, to rise, to prosper, and to determine their own destiny. To realize that future, the Asia-Pacific security architecture must be inclusive, it must be open, it must be transparent, and it must respect rights and not just might. It cannot shy away from the hard issues. It must provide a forum to openly discuss the challenges we face so that we can tackle them collectively. It must be action-oriented to help us manage today's challenges and prevent tomorrow's crises. And it must reward cooperation, not coercion. That's an audacious idea, but we meet today in a country that demonstrates what determination, consistency, and persistence can do, though we do so with heavy hearts. Lee Kuan Yew once said that, quote, "Anybody who thinks he's a statesman needs to see a psychiatrist." But the world lost a great friend, and indeed one of its premier statesmen, with his passing earlier this year. Lee Kuan Yew's spirit of statesmanship endures, perhaps nowhere more than in this room. Here, men and women of goodwill come together to think critically about the region's future. We owe it to Lee Kuan Yew, who described his leadership style as, quote, "I set out to do something, I keep on chasing it until it succeeds." And we owe it to all those we represent, citizens, organizations, governments, and businesses, to work together until we succeed, until every nation can rise and everybody wins. That's the future we all need to keep chasing. We've succeeded before. Over the past 70 years, the Asia-Pacific has grown and prospered in so many ways. Miracle after miracle has occurred. First Japan, then Taiwan, South Korea, Southeast Asia, including Singapore, rose and prospered. And now China and India are rising and prospering. And the region's not done yet. Today, over 60% of the world's population lives in the Asia-Pacific. It's the fulcrum of the global economy, one of the fastest growing regions of the world. That sustained growth, supported by increased regional and international trade, has lifted millions out of poverty and into the middle class. And even though there's still room for improvement, democracy and freedom have spread throughout the region. Meanwhile, the United States is doing well too. Following the worst recession since the Great Depression, the U.S. economy has made great gains in both jobs and GDP. Progress will continue because of America's dynamic and innovative businesses, strong commitment to the rule of law, world-class universities, and the domestic energy revolution now underway. And the U.S. military, long the finest fighting force the world has ever known, has improved its readiness while maintaining its unmatched operational edge and unrivaled capabilities. America's so-called rebalance has always been about sustaining the progress occurring all around the Asia-Pacific and helping the region continue to fulfill its promise. As Secretary of Defense, I'm personally committed to its next phase, in which DoD will deepen long-standing alliances and partnerships, diversify America's force posture, and make new investments in key capabilities and platforms. The Department is investing in the technologies that are most relevant to this complex security environment, such as new unmanned systems for the air and sea, a new long-range bomber, and new technologies like the electromagnetic railgun, lasers, and new systems for space and cyberspace, including a few surprising ones. As the United States develops new systems, DoD will continue to bring the best platforms and people forward to the Asia-Pacific, such as the latest Virginia-class submarines, the Navy's P-8 Poseidon surveillance aircraft, the newest stealth destroyer, the Zumwalt, and brand new carrier-based E-2D Hawkeye early warning and control aircraft. But the rebalance's next phase is more than just about security. The United States is increasing economic and diplomatic engagement. The Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Agreement, or TPP, just passed an important milestone in the U.S. Congress. And when it's completed, it will unlock tremendous economic opportunities, not only for the United States, but for countries across the Pacific Rim. It will create a diverse network of trade and investment relations driven by TPP's high standards, reducing reliance on any one network. Diplomatically, Secretary Kerry and other members of the Cabinet are making frequent visits to the region and hosting many of their counterparts this year. And President Obama will be to meet a number of Asian leaders at the White House before traveling here again in November. Senator Gardner, Senator Sullivan have been and will continue to be leaders in this important national effort. And that's because for decade upon decade, regardless of what else was going on at home or in other parts of the world, during Democratic and Republican presidencies, in time of surplus and deficit, war and peace, the United States has stood with its allies and partners here and helped maintain peace and stability in the Asia Pacific. And the United States always will. It's important to remember that America's rebalance and our overall and long-standing strategy to promote an Asia-Pacific regional security architecture where everyone rises has never aimed to hold any nation back or push any country down. The United States wants every nation to have an opportunity to rise and prosper and win, because it's good for the region and good for all of our countries. Indeed, as countries across the Asia-Pacific rise, as nations develop, as military spending increases, and as economies thrive, we expect to see changes in how countries define and pursue their interests and ambitions. In addition to those changes, we've seen the region's complex security environment become more fraught. North Korea continues to provoke. Decades-long disputes over rocks and shoals are compounded by quarrels over fishing rights, energy resources, and freedom of access to international waters and airspace. As the challenge of climate change looms larger, natural disasters not only threaten lives, but also upset trade and economic growth. And at the same time, terrorism, foreign fighters, cyber attacks, and trafficking in both people and narcotics plague this region like any other. These challenges risk upsetting the positive trajectory we've all been on and the rise of so many in the Asia Pacific. That can make it hard to remember our common interests, but the progress we've made and must continue demands that we do so. Unlike elsewhere in the world, the peace in the Asia Pacific has never been maintained by a region-wide alliance like NATO in Europe. And that made sense for the Asia Pacific, with its unique history, geography, and politics. Instead, regional peace, stability, and security here have required all of our nations coming together behind shared interests. We must continue to come together. Today and in the years ahead, security must be the shared responsibility of all of us, all our nations. With the strengthening of the East Asia Summit, we have the foundation for a stronger architecture. It's incumbent upon all of us to make it better by reaffirming our long-standing rules and norms, strengthening our institutions, modernizing alliances, enhancing capabilities, and improving connectivity. As President Obama said in Brisbane last year, an effective security order for Asia must be based not on spheres of influence or coercion or intimidation where big nations bully the small, but on alliances of mutual security, international law and international norms, and the peaceful resolution of disputes. First, we must all reaffirm the guiding principles and the rules that have served this region so well. Disputes should be resolved peacefully through diplomacy, not aggression or intimidation. All countries should have the right to freedom of navigation and overflight so global commerce can continue unimpeded. And all nations should be able to make their own security and economic choices free from coercion. These are the rights of all nations. They're not abstractions, and nor are they subject to the whims of any one country. They're not privileges to be granted or withdrawn by any country. These rules make sense, they've worked, and they can continue to help all our nations to rise, so long as we reinforce them instead of putting them at risk. Second, we must strengthen regional institutions. The nations of ASEAN have laid the foundation for the architecture in Southeast Asia that we enjoy today, and ASEAN will continue to be central to it. That's why the United States and the Department of Defense are making an affirmative investment of time, resources, and engagement in ASEAN. That's why America has committed to sending a new U.S. defense advisor to augment the U.S. mission to ASEAN in order to improve coordination meeting. As ASEAN works to build its community in the years ahead, the United States encourages member countries to continue to seek out new and innovative ways to work together and pool resources to maintain regional Asia Pacific for decades. And the United States is working with allies like Australia, Japan, and the Republic of Korea, Thailand, and the Philippines to be sure all our alliances continue to serve this vital function. Modernization means changing these alliances to address the evolving threat environment, as the United States has done with South Korea, and growing those alliances into platforms for regional and global cooperation, as we've done with Australia and Japan. Under Prime Minister Abe, Japan is increasing its engagement in Southeast Asia. Through the recently updated guidelines for the U.S.-Japan defense cooperation, the United States and Japan will be able to do more as an alliance in the region and beyond. Forward stationing America's most advanced capabilities in Japan, such as the Global Hawk long-range surveillance drone, Aegis ballistic missile defense destroyers, and the recently announced CV-22 Osprey, will enable further rapid and allied responses to regional contingencies. Meanwhile, the U.S.-Korea alliance not only assures deterrence and stability on the Korean Peninsula, it increasingly works for the region as well. And in Australia, U.S. and Australian forces now train side by side, not only with each other, as they have for many years, but also with friends and partners across Southeast Asia. Beyond alliances, the United States is also deepening its partnerships with friends across the region, including India and Vietnam, where, as I said, I will travel next week. The United States is looking for new ways to complement India's Act East policy and find meaningful areas of cooperation in the Asia Pacific. And the 2015 U.S.-India Defense Framework I will sign next week will open up this relationship on everything from maritime security to aircraft carrier and jet engine technology cooperation. We're leveraging America's alliances and partnerships to pursue new forms of cooperation, and that's why America's trilateral networks are blossoming also. With Japan and Australia, the United States is strengthening maritime security in Southeast Asia and expanding trilateral exercises and exploring defense technology cooperation. With Japan and Korea, the United States is building on a first-of-its-kind information sharing arrangement that will help them collectively deter and respond to crises. And with Japan and India, the United States is sharing lessons learned on disaster responses and building greater maritime security cooperation. Fourth, in addition to strengthening relationships, we must enhance the capacities of the regional security architecture, particularly on maritime security. American men and women in uniform are working together with countries in the region to build that capacity, especially on maritime security. For example, the USS Fort Worth, one of the Navy's nimble littoral combat ships, just returned from a regional tour where it was welcomed everywhere from South Korea to Southeast Asia. And Singapore's willingness to host LCS ships like Fort Worth helps all of us respond more quickly and effectively to regional crises. For example, when AirAsia Flight 8501 disappeared this past winter, the Fort Worth was able to be on the scene within 24 hours to help with search and recovery. We're doing even more together. In Vietnam, where I will travel next, the United States is providing equipment and infrastructure support to the Vietnamese Coast Guard. Just this month in Malaysia, the USS Carl Vinson Carrier Strike Group participated in air combat training with Malaysian air and surface units. In the Philippines, the United States is helping to build a national coast watch system to improve Manila's maritime domain awareness. And in Indonesia, America recently began conducting sea surveillance exercises together, which included for the first time flight portions over the South China Sea. And that's just a start. Today, I'm pleased to announce that DoD will be launching a new Southeast Asia Maritime Security Initiative. And thanks to the leadership of the senators here today and others, Congress has taken steps to authorize up to $425 million for these maritime capacity building efforts. And fifth, to ensure that our institutions, alliances, partnerships, and capability building efforts meet their potential, we must be better connected. We can accomplish this by working together, communicating better, and developing habits of cooperation. Every year, the United States helps plan and host hundreds of exercises and engagements in this region. From Foal Eagle to Bala-Katan, from Malabar to Garuda Shield, RIMPAC and Talisman Sabre to Cobra Gold, with every engagement, we get smarter and more effective together, while decreasing the risk of misinterpretation and miscalculation. We can also limit this risk by improving communication further. For example, the United States and China have agreed to 2 historic confidence-building agreements this past fall, and the United States hopes to do more. We're working to complete another measure this year that aims to prevent dangerous air-to-air encounters. Building better habits of U.S.-China military-to-military cooperation not only benefits both countries, but benefits the whole region as well. Beyond exercises and military-to-military cooperation, we also China, Thailand, and others. And we all don't just work together. Perished when their members crashes, and America will keep being here, committed to the long-standing practice of playing a pivotal part, in assuring a comprehensive solution and quick action to save lives. I want to commend Malaysia's leadership, as well as Indonesia, Thailand, and others who are working along with the United States and others to locate the migrants and prepare search and rescue operations. These humanitarian efforts and the habits of cooperation they help form demonstrate what we can do when we work together. Working together, as we have in Nepal, in the fight against piracy and in preventing illegal trafficking and fishing in the Gulf of Thailand, just to name a few examples, allows us to do more and better around the region. And that's how we reach the future a stronger security architecture affords, a future where everyone continues to rise and everyone continues to win. To realize that future, we must tackle urgent issues like the security and stability of the South China Sea. Yesterday, I took an aerial transit of the Strait of Malacca, and when viewed from the air, it is even clearer how critical this region's waterways are to international trade and energy resources. We've all benefited from free and open access to the South China Sea and the Strait of Malacca. We all have a fundamental stake in the security of the South China Sea. And that's why we all have deep concerns about any party that attempts to undermine the status quo and generate instability there, whether by force, coercion, or simply by creating irreversible facts on the ground, in the air, or in the water. Now, it's true that almost all the nations that claim parts of the South China Sea have developed outposts over the years of differing scope and degree. In the Spratly Islands, Vietnam has 48 outposts, the Philippines 8, Malaysia 5, and Taiwan 1. Yet one country has gone much further and much faster than any other, and that's China. China has reclaimed over 2,000 acres, more than all other claimants combined, and more than in the entire history of the region. And China did so in only the last 18 months. It's unclear how much farther China will go. That's why this stretch of water has become a source of tension in the region and front-page news around the world. The United States is deeply concerned about the pace and scope of land reclamation in the South China Sea, the prospect of further militarization, as well as the potential for these activities to increase the risk of miscalculation or conflict among claimant states. As a Pacific nation, a trading nation, and a member of the international community, the United States has every right to be involved and concerned. But these are not just American concerns. Nations across the region and the world, and many of you here in the room today, have also voiced the same concerns and raised questions about China's intentions in constructing these massive outposts. So let me make clear the position of the United States. First, we want a peaceful resolution of all disputes. To that end, there should be an immediate and lasting halt to land reclamation by all claimants. We also oppose any further militarization of disputed features. We all know there's no military solution to the South China Sea disputes. Right now, at this critical juncture, it is time for renewed diplomacy, focused on finding a lasting solution that protects the rights and the interests of all. As it is central to the regional security architecture, ASEAN must be a part of this effort. The United States encourages ASEAN and China to conclude a code of conduct this year. And America will support the right of claimants to pursue international legal arbitration and other peaceful means to resolve these disputes, just as we will oppose coercive tactics. Second, the United States will continue to protect freedom of navigation and overflight, principles that have ensured security and prosperity in this region for decades. There should be no mistake. The United States will fly, sail, and operate wherever international law allows, as U.S. forces do all over the world. America, alongside its allies and partners in the regional architecture, will not be deterred from exercising these rights, the rights of all nations. After all, turning an underwater rock into an airfield simply does not afford the rights of sovereignty or permit restrictions on international air or maritime transit. Finally, with its actions in the South China Sea, China is out of step with both the international rules and norms that underscore the Asia-Pacific security architecture and the regional consensus that favors diplomacy and opposes coercion. These actions are spurring nations to respond together in new ways. In settings as varied as the East Asia Summit to the G7, countries are speaking up for the importance of stability in the South China Sea. Indonesia and the Philippines are putting aside maritime disputes and resolving their claims peacefully. And in venues like ADMM Plus and the East Asia Maritime Forum, nations are seeking new protocols and procedures to build maritime cooperation. The United States will always stand with its allies and partners. It's important for the region to understand that America is going to remain engaged, continue to stand up for international law and universal principles, and help provide security and stability in the Asia-Pacific for decades to come. The South China Sea is just one issue we will face as the Asia-Pacific continues to rise and prosper. There will surely be others. We cannot predict what challenges the future holds, but we do know how we can work to ensure the peace and prosperity of the region and the opportunity to rise for all nations and all people. For that to happen, we must do so together. What the region needs instead is an architecture where everybody rises and everybody wins. That's what's happening across the region right now. We come together on a daily basis to settle disputes, respond to crises, and prevent conflict. For example, in the Bay of Bengal, India and Bangladesh have proven that diplomacy can work in resolving maritime differences. In Southeast Asia, nations like Singapore, Vietnam, and Malaysia are developing new training facilities that will build regional capacity in peacekeeping, disaster relief, and counterterrorism. And in the Indian Ocean, many nations, including China, are rooting out the scourge of piracy. But we all know we have more work to do. And by taking steps now to ensure the regional architecture that has reinforced norms, stronger institutions and alliances, more capabilities, and deeper connectivity, we can ensure our successors at the Shangri-La Dialogue in 20 years will be talking about the challenges and opportunities presented by the rise of yet other Asia-Pacific nations. But I hope they'll also be discussing, perhaps, the latest U.S.-China-India multilateral maritime exercise, a Japan-ROK joint disaster response in the South China Sea, an ASEAN-wide security network, a new understanding for cyberspace that ensures security and free flow of information. If those are the conversations at Shangri-La in 2035, we will have succeeded. We will still face challenges and crises, but we'll face them together with a regional security architecture where everyone rises and everybody wins. And that will be a worthy legacy. Thank you.
Mr. Secretary, thanking you very much for that working together, rising together message, and for your strategic clarity in describing how states in the region need to exercise a certain restraint in order to ensure diplomatic solution to some of the differences of opinion that exist here. We're now going to take 5 or 6 questions. Let me remind you again of the two-step process. You put your chip into the right-hand side of the microphone and press the button. Your microphone will turn green, but that does not mean your microphone is on. It only means that I see you in your queue. I will turn your microphone on and turn it red, and I also am able to turn it off if you go on a little bit too long. So we have a long list of questions. I'll maybe take 3 and then come back to Dr. Carter. The first is from Francois Hesbourg.
Thank you very much indeed, John. Thank you, Ash, for a broad-ranging and indeed very clear statement. Now, in strategy, it is always important to understand the purpose of the actions of your partners and protagonists. And therefore, I will ask you, what is your understanding of China's purpose in its current actions in the South China Sea? Is China creating facts in the sea on the assumption that it believes that there will be no strong and sustained US response, thus opening indeed the field to the sort of miscalculations that you very rightly referred to? Or on the contrary, does China act the way it does because it is expecting the United States to be reacting the way it does, that is, with clarity and firmness? And if that is the case, well, what does that tell us about the relevance and the effectiveness of the US response? Now, I hope my question will not have ruffled too many Chinese and American feathers. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Francois. I really can't speak for my colleagues in China, so I would let them speak for themselves. And I'll say that the United States has the view that I expressed, but this isn't solely a U.S. view. This is a view of many states in the region, all of them concerned. The United States is calling for a halt to reclamation activities and to further militarization, not just by China, but by all the claimants to the South China Sea. Our view is not that the South China Sea disputes ought to be resolved in this way or that way. Our view is that they ought to be resolved peacefully. That's the principle that the United States stands for, and that's not about any one particular country. It's not directed at any one particular country. We are not creating new facts. The new facts are in the South China Sea, and they were not created by the United States.
Yoichi Kato from the Asahi Shimbun in Japan.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I would like to ask a question regarding the South China Sea and China's land reclamation. You mentioned in your speech that there should be an immediate and lasting halt to land reclamation. But this kind of rhetorical appeals have been made in the past, and the reality is, as we see, the provocation has not been stopped, but in reality, to the contrary, it's been escalated. And isn't it time I think it's time for the United States to go to the next phase to demonstrate how these rhetorical appeals can make a tangible difference. My question is, what is it that the United States is ready to do besides, as you say, fly, sail, and operate? I think this is really important just beyond South China Sea, because how to deter this kind of low-intensity provocation is exactly the new and existing challenges that we all face in this region. Thank you.
Well, it's a very good question, and I just want to go back to the beginning here. This is behavior that the United States finds objectionable, but importantly, many other countries in the region do. So I think the way to reframe slightly your question is, what is going to be the effect internationally, both in the United States and regionally, to the persistent failure to solve these disputes in a peaceful way? And I observe a couple of effects that are not just in the United States, but regionally. Many countries are expressing publicly, and of course to the United States, their concern. Many of them, as a consequence, want to strengthen their relationships with the United States and others of their neighbors and partners. And so this kind of behavior, I think if it doesn't stop, one of the consequences of that will be the continued coalescing of concerned nations around the region and around the world. We observe that, we experience that. We're one of the many countries that are concerned, but we're not by no means the only one.
Thank you very much. I thought it interesting that we have introduced in this dialogue potentially a new term of art in the strategic studies profession, deter low-intensity provocation. I hadn't heard it phrased quite that way before. Josh Rogan from Bloomberg.
Thank you very much. Mr. Secretary, I'd like to ask you about another growing security concern in the region, the rising and accumulating nuclear arsenal of North Korea. There have been two stories in the press this week. One, that the United States reportedly used a Stuxnet-like computer virus to attempt unsuccessfully to penetrate North Korea's nuclear network. And two, that Iran and North Korea have increasing and ongoing nuclear and missile cooperation. What I'd like to ask you is, many people in Washington say you are the new leader of the Asia portfolio in the Obama administration. Is that true? And if so, do you plan to reinvigorate what many in Washington feel is a failed policy of strategic patience with regard to North Korea in this, the twilight of the Obama administration? Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, let me say that I am not the leader of the Obama administration's policy in Asia. The President Obama is the leader of the policy. And second of all, it's not a policy of the Obama administration only, the point I tried to make. This is a tradition of 7 decades where the United States has stood with allies and partners and tried to stand for and help build a principled security system in Asia based upon norms and respect for one another, and not coercion, not use of force. This in a region, as I noted, that doesn't have any formal security structure and has many unhealed, yet unhealed wounds of the past. And that collective system of security, that what I called architecture in the speech of everybody rises and everybody wins, has really worked for 7 decades. It's been enormously successful, and it is represented by the miracle that is around us here in the great city of Singapore and the miracles in all the countries represented in this room. It's a terrific success story, and it would be a shame for all of us not to keep that success going. So that's the theme that I wanted to sound today. With respect to your particular question on North Korea and North Korea's provocations, its nuclear programs, and so forth, North Korea remains a troubling and provocative exception to the general rule in this region of countries that pursue a system of peace and stability. I can't comment on particulars of what Iran and North Korea might be doing. But with respect to North Korea's nuclear program, this is something we've been concerned about for a long time. This is, again, something that we have attempted collectively a multilateral diplomatic approach to stopping. That is what the efforts by Japan, South Korea, China, Russia, and the United States, all neighbors of North Korea, have been trying to do for some years, which is create an environment on the Korean Peninsula that is nuclear weapons free. And I think that that effort has as yet not achieved success. On the other hand, it has shown great solidarity among 5 countries united in their opposition to nuclear proliferation on the Korean Peninsula and dedicated to working together. So there's a in what is otherwise an troubling circumstance, you see there reflected the kind of habits of peaceful approach and collective approach that I'm speaking about today.
Senior Colonel Zhao from the People's Liberation Army. Your mic is on.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Carter, you criticized China's construction activities on some islands and reefs in your speech. I think your criticism is groundless and not constructive. For instance, you mentioned freedom of navigation and overflight. I think the freedom of navigation in the South China Sea is not at all an issue, because the freedom has never been affected. And also, it is groundless to criticize China for affecting regional peace and stability through construction activities, since China has never taken any proactive measures. In fact, the disputes in the South China Sea has been there for decades. And over the past decades, the region has been peaceful and stable just because China's great restraint. So I think China's activities are legitimate, reasonable, and justified. So my question is, Recently, U.S. has taken some measures, such as harsh criticism towards China and even military reconnaissance activities, even military threat. So my question is, does these measures help to resolve the disputes in the South China Sea and maintain peace and stability in the region? Thank you.
Thank you. A few things. The first is the questioner is correct that there are other states claimant in the South China Sea and than China. And so this is about a bigger principle and not just about one country. It is true, as I said, that China's recent large-scale activities are unprecedented. But the precedent of land reclamation is one that now 5 countries, as I indicated in my speech, have engaged in. And our position, just to be clear, is that all of the claimants to the South China Sea disputes should halt reclamation, not further militarize those features, and pursue a peaceful resolution. With respect to U.S. activities, the U.S. has been flying and sailing in the South China Sea for decades and decades and decades, and as I indicated, we don't intend to change that in any way. That is not a new fact. Nor is it a new fact when the free press of the West covers large-scale land reclamation activities. That's not a U.S. action. That's an action by the international free press observing a fact, a new fact, which is not an American fact. It's a Chinese fact. And the American facts are basically unchanged. We continue to fly and sail and operate in the South China Sea peacefully and lawfully as we have for decades.
Thank you very much. I'm going to quickly just take 2 questions in a row, one from Professor Kisho Mabubane. Kisho, your microphone's on, and then I'll move to Senator Dan Stevens. Kisho?
Thank you very much, John. Secretary Carter, let me begin by saying that the United States has done a remarkable job of managing the rise of China, is emerged as the number 2 power without disrupting the global order, and a lot of it, frankly, has been due to very benevolent United States actions. But as China keeps rising and inevitably becomes the number 1 economic power in the world, you as a historian will know that strategic adjustments will have to be made by both sides. So as you look ahead to the future, and you ask yourself the question, what strategic adjustments both countries will have to make to ensure that both have sufficient space to grow and live together in this region, what else do you think needs to be done? You mentioned that the 2 confidence-building measures have already been carried out. You didn't specify what they were, but if you can tell us more about what the United States and China are doing on a larger front, on a larger scale, to ensure that both sides can live together in peace in this region.
Thank you. And could I just ask Senator Dan Sullivan to make his question and point, and then the Secretary can answer both.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary, congratulations on an outstanding speech. I just want to comment. I believe that the U.S. comes to this dialogue with some important momentum on some key issues. You mentioned in your speech the strong bipartisan support for the U.S. military rebalance in the Asia-Pacific. There's also the recent vote on the Trade Promotion Authority in the U.S. Senate, bipartisan, that I think bodes well for our economic rebalance. And then you touched briefly in your speech on the energy revolution in the United States that's taking place. Can you expand a bit more on the huge potential that we have both not only in the United States, but with regard to energy security and broader security in the Asia-Pacific that comes with the huge opportunities that we are now seeing with regard to energy production in America and what that means for this region? Thank you.
Thank you. First, with respect to the first question, I think the phrase was the United States has allowed China to rise. We don't think of it that way at all. We don't allow people or disallow people to do anything. I like to think that the United States was part of a regional system of peace and stability that wherein China could peacefully develop its economy in safety and freedom and independence. But it's not for one state or another to allow one thing or another. The nice thing about the system that I'm trying to describe that we should continue about the future is it's about all of us creating an environment in which everybody can rise and win. And there are other rising powers in Asia, both military but also culturally, economically, politically, and that is welcome by the United States. I want to be clear about that. We've been welcoming that kind of development for 70 years, and I think that's a consensus in the region to welcome that. So we don't allow or disallow anything. And second, you're right. As countries change and countries rise, there will need to be adjustments made. And the United States understands that. And it's not just China's rise, which is impressive, but Japan is rising and changing in the way it is addressing its own defense. India is, and many other countries in the region. And so it's a very dynamic region, and it's not about any one place, either the United States or China. It's about everybody. And with respect to the relationship between the United States and China, I am very committed myself to working with China's government and the Chinese military on confidence-building measures, work we can do together to both demonstrate and enhance our ability to work together towards a common future in which everyone rises and everyone wins. I think that's a good thing, and we're strongly supportive of that in the United States, and I look forward to working with Chinese colleagues to that end. With respect to Senator Sullivan's point, first of all, let me thank you, sir, and thank the entire delegation led here by Senator McCain, who knows this region as well or better than anybody in this room. Thank you for taking the time to be here, and as you indicated, to show that this is a long-standing and widely shared bipartisan engagement in this region. You and your own expertise and commitment reflects that. And thanks for your question about energy security, about which you are one of our experts. I'll only say this. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to fly, as I mentioned in my speech, up the Strait of Malacca, and there was tanker upon tanker upon tanker upon tanker heading down to fuel the great economic engine of progress and prosperity and everybody winning and everybody rising that I've been speaking about. Incredibly impressive testament to the rise of this region and to its critical dependence upon freedom of the commons, freedom of navigation. There couldn't be a way you could look out of an airplane and see a better sign of what it's all about and what we're trying to preserve here. The United States, for its part, is, as you indicate, having a domestic energy revolution that is rapidly turning the United States from an energy consumer, net consumer, to an energy net producer. That is a major historic and strategic change. It's obviously very beneficial, and that's good for the United States. It doesn't take away from the fact that for China, for Japan, for many of the countries of Asia, those tankers coming through the strait are a vital lifeline. And that's why it's so important for all of us to keep that freedom of navigation, that peaceful environment going. And there could be no better way of capturing in one mental image the kind of security future that this region needs, and certainly that the United States, just speaking for us, wants to continue to be a part of and is very grateful for being a part of. And on that point, I should thank all of you in the audience. I see so many great friends and colleagues. I look forward to working with each and every one of you, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to share some thoughts with you this morning. And John, as always, my friend, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask you all in 60 seconds to thank the Secretary of Defense for his marvelous speech and explanation of U.S. defense policy and broader security policy in the region. I want to take 45 seconds to thank you for three things. First, for using this platform to announce your new Southeast Asian Maritime Security Initiative. Second, for reaffirming at this Shangri-La Dialogue your commitment to close military-to-military cooperation with the People's Republic of China and indeed with all the other states represented here. And thirdly, by making those two statements, giving real substantive life to the Shangri-La Dialogue process. Mr. Secretary, thank you very much for being here and good luck on your mission here.